Good morning. Welcome to MSc Webinars. This morning we're going to discuss how colleges can tackle all the different issues around the STEM shortages. So that's STEM skills, of course. Thank you for joining us. We've got Carla Archibald with us today, who is our Business Development Manager for MSc for Further Education. She's going to be going through the presentation, which is great. Thank you, Carla. Just to say a quick thing before we start, if you have any questions as we go through, it's quite easy just to put them in the box at the bottom of your control panel, which I'll be able to see, and then we can address them at the end of the presentation. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Carla. Good morning, Carla.
Good morning. Morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Thanks for joining us this morning. So today or this morning, over the next half an hour, we are going to look at how colleges can tackle STEM skills shortages. And this comes off the back of our recent report into the demand for STEM jobs. This is on our blog, and as a follow-up, I will send everyone who's on the webinar today our in-depth report. Now, this looks across kind of all sectors, and what we're aiming to do today is look at how specifically this affects the FE or education provider sector. We've got a really nice video that we did as a follow-up that will dive directly into some of the issues that we'll talk about today. So you will get the slides, you will get the recording of the webinar. I'll also send the report and the short video. So that recent report into the demand for STEM jobs and skills revealed many interesting points, but I think the main point out of that was the need to look at the issue not as a national problem, but as a series of local challenges. Anyone who knows MSc will know that local is our kind of bread and butter and our focus. So we'll delve into this in much more detail as we go along, but yeah, really kind of interesting that something as important as STEM skills shortages also needs to be addressed at a local level as well. So in this webinar, we wanted to focus on the FE sector in particular and how your college or organisation can use the kind of data that we present in the report and kind of provide organisations as a whole to tackle them STEM skills gaps in your region. So over the next half an hour, we will be looking at how education providers can rise to that challenge. We'll have a look at how there's a number of STEM indicators key to this challenge, including job growth, industry needs, salary levels, and in-demand skills. And then we'll also think about how we can feed this back into your curriculum planning, employer engagement, and also student engagement. We'll do a little bit of a summing up and then also give you a few details on our MSc National Conference. So a brief overview of who we are, what we do at MSc as a reminder, and to give a little bit of context into today's webinar. So we often hear from the government, media and employer groups that Britain faces a shortage in STEM subjects, which are science, technology, engineering and maths predominantly. However, what we rarely hear are specific details of what those skills shortages actually are. And then most importantly, where they are. In other words, we know there's a problem, but we don't necessarily understand the specifics of that problem. So you guys will know, or if you don't know, it's our mission at MSc to help people make better decisions relating to the world of work. We do that by giving providers, so whether you're an economic development organisation, an FE or HE provider, or another educational organisation, we give all of those organisations robust, detailed local labour market data. And that's with the aim of helping you better understand where you should be focusing your efforts. That can fall into many different categories, so whether it's curriculum planning cycle, engaging with students or local employers, but the idea is that you can use data to promote a more relevant curriculum that meets the needs of the local economy. So we hear daily how Britain is facing this huge skill shortage in STEM jobs. So let's look at that national picture and how those STEM jobs have grown in recent years across the UK. So we'll begin with a really straightforward comparison between the growth of STEM jobs and non-STEM jobs. This graph shows just that. We can see immediately how much the demand for STEM jobs has outpaced the demand for non-STEM jobs. So the graph shows that from 2003 to 2017, STEM jobs increased by 20%. So that is this section here, 20% growth from 2003 to 2017, compared to just 15% for that of non-STEM jobs. The beauty of labour market data is that we can take all of the SOC codes or the occupations and group them into a STEM job group. So we can really easily pull some of this data and see the comparison. If we look further than 2017, so this section here, we can also see that the demand for STEM jobs continues to grow faster than that for non-STEM roles. So our projections show a growth of 3.1% or 81,000 jobs from 2018 to 2026. And if we compare this again to non-STEM jobs, we're seeing a growth of 2.5% for the same time period. So basically, that slide shows us that the growth in STEM jobs has clearly outstripped that of non-STEM roles. And we also know that this trend looks set to continue for the next few years. What we now need to do, though, is identify the specifics of this growth, which we can do by breaking those total STEM job growth down into 8 clusters that we've done on this slide. So basically, talking about those SOC codes, we can pull all of those together and we've got these STEM occupation clusters, if you like. We go down to 4-digit SIC and SOC code without going into too much detail. It's the most detailed level of occupation. So that ends up with us having lots and lots of engineering jobs or IT jobs or scientist jobs. So we pull these into 8 clusters that just allows us to aggregate those numbers and have a look at that group as a whole. So on this slide, we've got the green bar showing all job growth, and then the dark blue bar shows the STEM occupation groups labelled at the top of each graph. So each one of those occupation groups with that green bar showing Britain, so job growth across Britain, and this is from 2003 to 2026, and then we've got that dark blue bar showing that occupation cluster. So to highlight a number of different things then that are of interest to us just looking at this. The most obvious point is that there's been significant growth over all 8 of the STEM occupation clusters. So in all of those graphs there, we can see there's a growth amongst that blue bar from 2003, there's a 2010 marker up to 2026. Second thing to note though is that along with all of the occupations, the STEM occupation clusters either kind of declined or stagnated around the time of the 2008 recession. So if we look at that first marker on that graph, this is 2010. So around that 2008 mark, we're seeing a bit of a decline in almost everything. And then the last thing is that a number of the clusters have outstripped general job growth since the recession. So we're seeing an increase in general STEM occupations compared to non-STEM occupations or all job growth, and this looks set to continue into the future. Really interesting stuff. But if we pick out some of those specific STEM clusters that are set to grow, we've got conservation professionals, which is seeing a high growth. That's this top left bar. IT professionals, which is just underneath. So again, significantly higher than general job growth. IT technicians is seeing a similar kind of thing, and so is scientists. Again, you will get all of these slides and feel free to share the data. So what does this mean specifically for the FE sector then? So these headline figures on national STEM skill shortages are really helpful in showing us that there's a clear demand for STEM skill occupations, which are vital to not only the UK economy as a whole, but also vital to local economic growth, which is where education providers come in. This national data shows that education providers need to do something about it, But again, going back to that previous point, it doesn't give us enough detail to be able to affect change at local level in terms of you guys being able to provide learners with the right skills that those employers need. What does it mean specifically for you guys? It shows us that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And I think that was my main takeaway from the report that we did. These STEM skills gaps aren't a national problem, but it's a local one. And change needs to happen at the local level to then fill those national skills gaps. Ultimately, FE sectors need to thoroughly understand the local region they serve and know specifically what skills gaps their local employers have in regards to STEM occupations, and not just assume that what's going on at national level is the same as local level. As we go through the slides, we'll see that that is not the case at all. So granular local labour market data on the region a college serves can help you do a number of things. So first of all, understand what STEM occupations are in demand within that region. So this region often sits across kind of many different local authorities, and what's going on in one local authority might be different to another, but as an education provider, you serve that whole LEP area, for example. Having granular data down to local authority level allows you to start unpicking that a little bit further and understanding what specific skills and occupation needs are in each one of those areas. It also helps us understand what hard and soft skills elements these occupations require, and this can then help shape and adapt curriculum. We can understand what industries and local employers are in need of those in-demand skills, so we take that one step further to employer engagement and having a look at some job data. And then we also can understand how wage and employment information on these STEM occupations varies and then can be used to engage students and market and effectively promote STEM sector courses to learners. So kind of end-to-end process there with using labour market data. Start to understand what STEM occupations are in demand, understand what skills elements are within those, then outreach to industries and local employers to make sure that you've got the right skill sets and the right courses on offer, and then promote these effectively to your students to show that STEM sector courses are kind of attractive and prosperous, but most importantly, the right ones, not the national STEM skills shortages. So much of the debate then around the shortage in STEM skills, we know takes place at a far too generic level. What I want to do on this slide is show that it needs to be kind of identified at local level, and different areas of the country have very different STEMs needs. So we can illustrate this point by comparing a couple of areas of the country that are particularly associated with STEM-related industries. So what I've chosen here is Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire, due to its heavy concentration of science and tech-related industries around the university in the science park. And then we've got the Thames Valley, which is the purple bars, with its high concentration of IT employers. We've got Britain on there as well, for a kind of generic comparison, but blue bar, purple bar is what we're looking at. So on this slide, we can see a demand for the 8 STEM clusters between 2018 and 2023 in terms of projected growth. So those 8 STEM clusters that we looked at on the previous slides, and kind of in terms of projected growth from 2018 to 2023. So again, a number of points of interest on this slide, which is crucial to kind of, it basically highlights how crucial it is to properly understand the STEM skills shortage. So firstly, we're clearly showing a demand for the various STEM clusters, which varies significantly from place to place. So no bar on that graph shows the same job growth in any region in any of the clusters. We're seeing different growth across all of the different STEM sectors at different rates in that time period. It therefore illustrates that, again, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. since Britain as a whole is often very different in aggregate compared to local demand areas. We're seeing the green bars here, each one of these are showing kind of that demand as a whole, but then we've got huge spikes. So if we look at kind of the growth projected for Cambridgeshire for scientists, we're seeing kind of huge growth, whereas Thames Valley is significantly lower. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. So this one, scientists here. 4.9 for Thames Valley, 3.3 for Cambridgeshire, and then we've got the Britain comparison. So just to hammer home that fact a little bit more then, what I'm going to look at is the occupational growth in engineering STEM occupations in the Yorkshire and Humber area between 2018 to 2022. So this data is pulled from Analyst, but what we can see from this table is that the three fastest growing occupations within this group are engineering professions at the top there, mechanical engineers and civil engineers. So good growth, but this is kind of what we're seeing within those STEM occupations. And this again shows the range of actual occupations at 4-digit in that engineering STEM occupation cluster. If we do the same for the same group of STEM occupations for the Northwest region in the same time period, we're seeing a little bit of a different story then. So what we see in this region is that the fastest growth engineering occupations are production and process engineers and design and development engineers. So two jobs that would require a very different skill set to the ones that we highlighted as the fastest growing in the Yorkshire and Humber. And engineering professionals actually goes down to the third fastest growing within the Northwest. So two very different stories. Then we'll do the same for the national picture across Great Britain, just by way of comparison. What we basically see here is that if we just went off this data to look at the skill shortages, we might run the risk of completely missing the skills needs within STEM occupations at local level. Here we're seeing a national growth of engineering professionals, as we saw in Yorkshire and Humber, but not in the Northwest. So kind of miss a trick there. We're also seeing a wider demand for design and development engineers and mechanical engineers. So to summarise, by knowing which STEM occupations have a competitive advantage within a particular region, what this is showing us is that an education provider can ensure learners and employers are both aware of this and then effectively offer the right training and employer links to make sure that there's a kind of a really smooth talent pipeline for these occupations. So that brings us on to local industry needs and employer engagement within the STEM skills shortage. So when we think of where STEM skills are most needed in terms of industries, we might automatically think of certain areas such as digital or civil engineering. Obviously, these sectors are likely to have a significant proportion of jobs that are STEM related, but in actual fact, looking at labour market data, STEM skills are identified throughout a much wider variety of sectors. So that top graph on this slide just shows that we were right, the proportion of the workforce in STEM industries does sit within that digital industry, but also within oil and gas. So we've got 59.3% of the workforce that sit within that digital industry that are made up of STEM occupations, but also 41% in oil and gas. So although the digital cluster will tend to employ mainly tech skills, there are also sectors which employ a high proportion of STEM skills, but might be more physical, such as oil and gas or vehicle and defence technology. So what labour market data lets us do, just to go into a little bit more detail on this point, is basically look at a staffing pattern of an industry to put some actual figures of which industries have the most demand for those STEM skills or STEM occupations. And this is exactly what this graph is showing us, this slide, sorry. So if we look at the digital and the oil and gas industry in comparison, what this is a staffing pattern. So we take that industry and look at every single job within that industry that makes up that workforce. What we've done is pull out those STEM occupations. So it'll give us a breakdown of each STEM occupation with a total number of jobs in that industry and then the percentage of that job within the sector. So you will get these slides, so you can have a look at these in a little bit more detail, but what it basically shows is that there's a very different makeup of jobs at the top end within each industry. So the digital industry employs programmers and software development professionals, as you kind of would imagine, but you've also got a whole range of other occupations in there. And then if we look at the oil and gas, when we look at STEM skills or STEM occupations, we've got a wide range of different occupations within there, but still some of that digital element within that. So how is this helpful for education providers? By identifying staffing patterns, it can basically help an education provider understand the range of industries that these jobs lead into, and then in turn help them engage with employers in all of those industries. So we're not just looking at kind of the industries that you would assume STEM skills or STEM occupations fit into, but you've then got a whole list of employers that might potentially have these openings for STEM jobs. A second point of that is you're also helping learners progress into meaningful employment after study. You've got a clear kind of understanding of where those learners will need to go and what types of skills they will need within certain industries. So once we've identified those STEM related occupations in demand at a local level and know what skills local employers are looking for, we're also able to look at some job postings data. So from this, we can build a relevant and meaningful curriculum that meets the needs of those STEM and non-STEM jobs. But what we can also do is start to identify employers who are recruiting for those positions. In effect, then you can engage with them confidently, knowing that you've got an offer or a workforce that will fulfill those skills needs. So on this slide, I've pulled out some data on those engineering occupations in demand in the Northwest. And what it basically does is give some headline figures. So we can see how many live vacancies there are. So that's the top bar. There's 1,900 unique postings from December to January. So within that month period. We can also look at what companies are hiring for those positions. So you've got a list of direct employers in the area that are looking for STEM related occupations. So these are for engineering. And we've also got some of those job titles. So we're taking that quite wooden SOC code and translating that into job titles that employers will be asking for. So you're basically making the link from the labour market data and the SOC code to what job titles that might translate into. All really useful stuff for effectively engaging with employers. So another part of the puzzle is knowing what skills these STEM occupations require. So what we see very often is that the topic tends to mention a number of things such as analytical skills, critical thinking and problem solving within these STEM occupations. We know these are important, but what we really need to do if we're going to find a solution for these STEM skills gaps locally is to listen to what the employers are saying. So become a little bit more scientific, not just about what skills we think they have, but actually really digging deeper into some of those job postings and pulling out some of those specific soft and hard skills. So using job postings analytic, again, so job postings data, the charts on the slide show the top 10 hard skills for all 8 STEM occupation clusters. I've picked out engineers, production managers, scientists, and conservation professionals. So these are across the country as a whole, again, looking at that national level, but what they show is that the percentage of unique postings that these specific skills in each one of those bars appear in. So specifically what we're seeing that management comes across in 3 of the 4 on the slide. So management in all of these as a skill is really, really important to employers. They're asking for that kind of as a top thing that learner or that worker needs to have. The number of the skills appear in many different clusters. So this kind of brings in the issue of transferable skills. So engineering, for example, features heavily in all 4 of the occupations. And we're seeing communications as a skill in 3 of the ones on the slide. So in terms of fixing STEM skill shortages, since there are clearly a number of skill similarities between each of these jobs, what it suggests is that maybe we need to have more of an emphasis on looking at upskilling people to fill these skills gaps that they lack, rather than focusing exclusively on training new people from scratch to have kind of just 1 or 2 of these skills. As we've looked though, not only are there variations in demand for skills between various STEM occupation clusters, but there's often a significant difference between regions. Again, job posting analytics is fantastic for this. To illustrate this, I've pulled out a chart that compares the top 10 hard skills demanded by employers posting job advertisements for STEM roles, and we've got Hackney at the top and Solihull at the bottom. So these 2 local authorities were the ones that projected to see the most STEM job growth over the next few years. So we've used those as an example. So we can see there's a number of common skills across the 2 local authorities in those STEM clusters. So management, CSS and JavaScript, programming language. But we can also see where the differences are. So this starts to tell us where why it's so important to get kind of stakeholders involved in developing solutions to this skill shortage. Hackney, for example, has a number of skills demands that are highly specialised. So in Hackney, we're seeing things like agile software development, Amazon Web Services, HTML, whereas on the flip side, on that bottom graph in Solihull, we're seeing very generic kind of skills that rise to the top more. Really interesting when you start to look at some of the STEM skills jobs. So if you look at web development, for example, a web developer in Manchester needs a very different set of skills to what we see in central London, and being able to look at the data at that level just gives us a really good idea of how we could probably assume that all web developers will need the same skills, and we design this curriculum that's kind of generic across these areas, but in different regions it's some of those skills that are more desired than others. So this brings us on to the final point and the final piece of the puzzle, I suppose, in looking at using salary and employment data to engage with students to effectively promote STEM sector jobs. So labour market data in general is a really, really powerful tool for engaging with learners, even more so when we start to look at things like STEM jobs. So by and large, we know that STEM jobs tend to be well paid. So earnings potential can be used as a really powerful incentive to attract more young people to consider careers like this. When thinking about those with responsibility for encouraging more people to train for STEM jobs, so schools outreach, kind of careers advisors, getting to grips with the wage information that these occupations offer is a must. So if you look at the top graph again, it gives us a very simple look at our 8 STEM clusters, this time by identifying a median hourly wage. And again, this is across Britain. So national wage data for each one of those areas. And remember, within those clusters, you've got a range of different occupations that all sit within those, but it gives us a good idea of what people will earn. So this can be used in kind of tutorials, on websites, on promotional material, and in any marketing to promote that kind of STEM sector, if you like. So it's helpful in showing us that it's clearly a fairly big spread of earnings potential across all of those clusters. But we can see at the bottom end, it doesn't necessarily mean that STEM jobs equal a big salary. If you're looking at some of the science and engineering technicians, they will earn significantly less than an IT professional in general across Britain. Having said that, the median wage for all of the occupations is above the median wage in Britain. So median wage for all jobs is around £12.50. So we're seeing kind of a bigger median wage, and STEM jobs can be considered to offer some of the best earnings potential in the country. And at the higher end, jobs within the clusters such as IT professionals, production managers and scientists are clearly among the best paid jobs in the country. If we look at this again though from a local perspective, the bottom graph on this slide is showing us the top 10 local authority areas in the country in terms of the average hourly wage for STEM jobs. So we can see that predictably they're all London boroughs, but there are a number of differences, mainly reflecting on kind of a greater presence of higher paid STEM roles in some parts of London than others. So City of London, Tower Hamlets, you've got kind of a bigger earnings potential in compared to some of the others, such as Hackney, Harrow and Ealing. Again, when you do this at any local authority level, what you can do is pick apart a LEP area that you serve, for example, and see how these STEM occupations are paid in different areas. So I think in summary on this point, STEM occupations are generally well paid, but as skills requirements differ from region to region and occupation growth does, my point is that so do wages. Labour market data on wage information can show STEM occupations are well paid, but which are particularly not. And I do think that national wage data on any occupation, not just STEM occupation, is sometimes misleading and not very helpful. So just a bit of summing up then, overview of what we've kind of covered. I think my main point from our report was that there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and the STEM skills gaps are a local problem, not necessarily a national. FE providers need to thoroughly understand a local region's requirements and identify specifically what skills gaps their local employers have in regards to STEM occupations. There's clearly a demand for future STEM skills, and I think we know that these are vital to UK economy, but if we're looking at local level and really kind of pushing economic growth, it's vital to the local economy as well. We know that it's a college's job to offer learners a wide range of options that lead to sustainable career paths, whether this be STEM or non-STEM. So feeding this type of data into curriculum planning is a really good way of making sure that they have an offer that meets local and national skills agendas. And finally, main point, skills requirements for STEM related occupations will be very different in one region compared to the region next door. So labour market data is vital to help us really unpick a region's specific skills requirements to plan and amend curriculum accordingly. So before I give you a bit of information on the conference, Debbie, do we have any questions?
We do, yes, we do. We have a question around whether or not apprenticeships is a key route to help with the skills shortages, especially as technology and engineering are applicable sort of for working, is more beneficial basically to the employers than a degree route. So do you think apprenticeships is the key to STEM?
I would say absolutely. Being kind of further education specific, I 100% believe that even by looking at some of the hard and soft skills within the STEM occupations that employers are asking for, these are really practical skills. So there's nothing better than a learner doing that on the job rather than in a classroom environment. I think T levels will be absolutely fantastic for STEM skills occupations to really understand what kind of skills that they need to go into further employment. So yes, I would say an apprenticeship is a fantastic way, and we can see that through things like job postings data.
Sure. Right. Thank you.
Is it just that one?
Yeah, just one question.
Lovely. Just to finish off, I just want to give you a little bit of a note about our national conference. So this will be the 4th conference that we've done. It will take place in Birmingham on the 16th of May, and the theme is Tomorrow's Workforce. So it will be all around defining, developing and delivering the skills of the future. So we work across 3 main sectors. So we've got the talent space, we've got the economic development space, and we've also got the education space. So we have a really good lineup of speakers across all of those sectors, with interactive workshops, and we've got a really good mix of HE providers, FE colleges, and also colleagues from LEPs and local kind of government bodies, as well as awarding organisations coming along. So you can register for this on our website. So if you just type in MZ National Conference, is that right, Debbie? There will be a full list of speakers, themes, the agenda for the day, and also a link to sign up as a delegate.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the numbers are quite limited because obviously we don't go huge with our conferences because we like to keep it personal. So if you are interested in coming, can you make sure you register quite quickly, please? Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you there. So just as a final note, my email address and phone number is on the slide. As I said at the beginning, I will be sending you around a few things in terms of follow-up, but if there's something that you want to ask me kind of more specifically, just give me a call or drop me an email, and we would love to hear about issues or challenges that you're kind of facing in terms of STEM skills, curriculum planning, employer engagement, student engagement, that we might be able to help with in terms of labour market data. Thanks for your time. Have a lovely weekend, everybody, and look forward to hearing from some of you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.